they had it in their heads that we were past the race issue, that King had done enough.
Hello and welcome to another epic conversation. I'm really excited to introduce you to Andrea. She is such a wonderful lady. We met through the Rizzle app. Neither of us are all that active on there anymore, but I'm really glad that we could make that initial contact there. Before we jump into the video, I want to tell you that we did a collaboration on her channel. I will put the link in the description. I've been lamenting my whitewashed history that I learned and grew up with for a while, and she taught me about Christopher Columbus, about Jim Crow laws. They went for a long time about things about slavery that I never knew about. And this video is heartbreaking and necessary. Like, it's about time we had our hearts broken. So you gotta go check out that video. And yes, let's jump into this video now. Andrea, go ahead and introduce yourself to us a little bit more and tell us where you are from and where did you grow up and just a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Andrea Hermit. I am over 50. I live in or near Atlanta, Georgia, and I am actually from the New York City area.
Something I'm really excited about is that we can be so frank and blunt about asking questions, because there is so much I don't know, and I'm really glad for you to tell me. Like, for example, what it was like to grow up as a Black person in the 1970s and how that affected your school career.
I was actually born in 68, so I went to school from like 73 to 86, and then college, of course. Why I think it's important to talk about my experiences and how Black people were treated then is because it's just hard to move forward and to understand what's going on now in the proper context if we don't look at what was going on back then and how we perceived things versus what was actually going on, because you perceive things differently as children versus, how your parents are perceiving them. So it's just real important to examine those things so that you can put what's going on today in the proper context. For example, going to school in the New York City area, just outside of New York City, Westchester County, in the 1970s was rather idyllic. There was never anything overtly racist about the way I was ever treated. So I was actually raised in a way where, as far as I could see, everything was perfect. But then my parents would say things that made me question their sanity, because they would say things based on race, but I just never, ever saw them.
That's so interesting that their perceptions just seemed so out of line with what you saw and felt.
I was shocked when you told me that you were actually placed in special ed when you were a kid. Like, how did you overcome that? How did the truth come out that you actually have a high IQ and a huge capacity for learning?
I was in special ed for kindergarten and first grade. And as I remember it, we had to go in to be tested for kindergarten. There was a big room, and we sat, and a lady finally came and got me and took me into a room and asked me a bunch of questions. I was a shy child, and honestly, I thought her questions were stupid, so I didn't answer them. And they put me in special ed. They didn't give me any benefit of the doubt that I might actually be intelligent. I just got slotted into special ed. I overcame that through what I would call an incident of mild violence in public school. In first grade, a teacher, we had a sub, and a teacher, the next door teacher, took it upon himself to come in and spank everyone in the classroom. Crazy, right? It's about 1974, 75. I think it was 75. And I just cried and cried, and they couldn't get me to stop crying. And the sub finally said, you know what, this girl wasn't really acting up, because I was crying because I was angry. And, they hugged me up and they said, don't tell your mother. So I went home and I told Mom. And she came in and she kind of beat up the teacher. And they, the next day, had me reevaluated. But it was the end of the school year. It was Flag Day in New York. That's like June, 10th or something. And they realized very quickly that I was not only not special ed, that I should have been in advanced classes. The big secret is that I wasn't being taught to read in special ed in first grade. So my sister, my older stepsister, who actually was special ed because she'd had an accident as a child, taught me to read. And so by the time they evaluated me, I was a very good reader, and they moved me to the hardest class because they had classes on levels. And the teacher in charge of that class was the guy who had spanked me. Thank goodness the school year was just about over, because he was kind of afraid at that point because my mother was crazy. And I went to Catholic school after that. I went to Catholic school 2nd grade through 8th grade. And at the end of 8th grade, I tested so well that I was accepted into every private high school. Every girls' high school in the area sent me an invitation to come there. I did not go to any of them. I was done with uniforms. I asked to go to public school. And I did well in public school. I struggled some in the beginning of college. But after college, I had myself evaluated for IQ. And I have a high IQ. But I never could get past the Mensa test. It really is culturally biased. I didn't know what half of those things were.
You are a huge activist for homeschooling. That's what your YouTube channel is about. I will be sure and link that down below in the description. What made you become an advocate for this?
I've never thought of myself as an activist, more of a proponent. I homeschooled my kids, and I journaled the whole thing. I had a public blog, and then I ended up writing for several websites about homeschooling, and people just kind of wanted to hear what I had to say. So we went through the whole homeschool journey, 2003 to 2013, when I sent my youngest to a women's college at, I think, 17 years and 1 month old. At that point, I just wanted to stay in homeschooling. I wanted to be a homeschool teacher. But I ended up taking a break because in my area, the people who were willing to accept my help couldn't pay, and the people who could pay didn't appreciate me being knowledgeable more so than them. Yeah, we'll just leave that between the lines. So, but I sat back and watched, and I started helping people who asked prepare for college entry and get their college applications together and move them towards scholarships and things like that. And then I thought I was done with homeschooling, but people would contact me, ask me questions, and I just started seeing that for a lot of people, not for all people, because public schools are fine for most people, but a lot of people, their minds aren't made for the way public school works. And so there's got to be another answer, and even those people who can do fine in public school, some of them could excel greater without it. And so, just being super aware of the deficits that were going on, watching all my male relatives do really poorly in public school, I knew at the very least that there had to be another answer for Black boys. Now, do I work with specifically black boys in my homeschool program? No. I like to see every shade and color in front of me. I work with everyone. There's a good mixture of kids. But I feel like we can seriously disrupt the school to prison pipeline for black boys through homeschooling.
I would really love to know more about this school to prison pipeline. These are just things that I know nothing about. So I'm really looking forward to learning more from you.
If you could say something to the people who are trying to keep segregation going, who are trying to hold you back, what would you say to them?
I don't feel like anybody ever specifically tried to segregate me. At least not during my formative years, not during my youth. It was never something tangible that I could put my hands on. I remember a few instances growing up that I could retell, and one of them specifically involved the current president of these here United States. One of my mother's best friends was trying to get an apartment in his building, and she was told that there were no apartments available. But she was dating a white police officer, so she then sent him to go see about the apartments, and suddenly the apartments were available. So that was interesting. She didn't take the apartment because she just didn't want to be in an environment where she so obviously wasn't wanted. So there was that. And then there was that time, because my family always rented, that my parents were looking for a new place. And I was in high school, and I said, why don't we just live by the high school? Because I'm literally walking a mile to school both ways uphill. And so living by the high school would be lovely. And my mother turned to me and was very angry. She said, they don't want us to live here. We cannot live here. And I was like, I don't care what they want. She says, you don't understand. If it was just me, I would do it. But I have kids. You have younger brothers. We can't just live wherever we want. And I was like, I didn't understand, because I had never seen or felt this atrocity. So why, mother, are you living in this make-believe restriction? Do you know what I mean? We were so sheltered from it that I was not aware at all. A year or so later, we had a handicapped boy in our school he was kind of like the whole school mascot. We all teased him and loved on him at the same time. But he came to school and he said, I got chased yesterday, because he was also the football mascot. He was a thalidomide baby, so he had shortened arms. And he was the football mascot, and he had been leaving late after football practice, and he was literally chased by a bunch of good old boys in a pickup. Yes, in the New York City area. In the New York City area, in Yonkers, New York, he was chased. And so that was the first time I was like, oh, maybe mama's not crazy. You know? For me personally, the first time I personally firsthand experienced any kind of segregation was in 1999, late 1998. When I lived in New Orleans, we left the city area and we moved out to the suburbs, and we were moving our things into this lovely bungalow. And a woman drives by and very angrily says, what are you doing? Excuse me? What are you doing with this place? What are you doing? And I just looked at her and I said, I'm reverse stealing. I am putting my belongings into the house. And she huffed and she drove off. And no one in that neighborhood ever spoke to us. And then a couple of months later, I'm parking my car and I'm going into my house that I'm renting. And a black woman runs down the street pushing a stroller with a white baby. And she says, "What are you doing when you're done with this house?" And I didn't understand because that didn't make sense. And so she repeated herself, "What are you doing when you're done with this house?" And I'm like, "Doing? Done? When you're done cleaning this house, what do you do next?" I said, "Cleaning? Honey, I live here." And she was blown away. And then she said, "Well, my boss is looking for a cleaning lady. Could you do that?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. But here's my card. And if you find a cleaning lady who needs more clients, could you pass it on?" And as she turned and walked away, she looked back over her shoulder and said, "You know, my cousin is a realtor and he can get you a home somewhere in a black neighborhood because they don't want us inwards over here." And she felt real justified as a black woman to say that to me. And then I had another instance in New Orleans where a black woman kept saying "us" inwards. And I was painting murals at her house because I worked in a design center. And I told her if she said it again, her mural wasn't getting finished. Her mural didn't get finished. So what would I say? I don't know that there's anything to say. I don't know that there's anything to say. I have always been a person who pushed those boundaries. I've always been a person that did what I wanted and went where I wanted. Yeah, I don't think that there's anything that I can say besides continuing to be above reproach. Could do anything to move anyone. I just literally have always just been me and let people get to know me. And I've had several people tell me how that's changed their minds now. It's a little disturbing to me, but it is what it is, right?
That's right. People are going to make their assumptions and believe what they're going to believe. But I really like that. Being above reproach. You are a wise woman. So this is a very broad question, but here goes. What do we need to know now? What do we need to do now?
So I think what we need to know now is that we can't afford to hide the truth. My parents' generation was extremely aware of race issues. They were aware of it because their parents had lived it, and they had also seen glimpses of it as small children. My parents came through it. They were the first to go to integrated schools. Actually, my mother didn't go to an integrated school. She went to a segregated school. So they had it in their heads that we were past the race issue, that King had done enough, that people had listened. And so while they dropped little pebbles of knowledge here and there, like the man won't let you do it, or, you know, we shouldn't live over there. As a child who never overtly felt racism, I thought they were nuts. I thought they were crazy. I thought they were mean. And I thought they were racist towards white people. It wasn't until I was in my 40s, well into my 40s, when I realized that we still had a major race problem in this country. I mean, I was aware of things. I lived in New Orleans when David Duke was running for Congress or Senate or whatever he was running for. You know, I lived in an area where I would see Klan members going into a hotel every Friday. I saw that. But I always thought it was fringe activity. And now that I see that it goes deeper than I ever expected, I'm kind of disappointed that my parents weren't more matter of fact with me and say, here's what's going on and here's what you need to read. You know, Dad used to always say, they won't let us have it. And I didn't know what that meant until a couple of years ago when I read about the race riots where they would go into black people's houses and burn their things. Like a whole city of black people was burned down because people were jealous that the black people had pianos in their homes. That's what he meant. And he didn't tell me. And so I think that's what we need to know. We need to know the whole history, all the history, nothing but the history, so that we can recognize what was, so we can look it in its stinking eye and call it what it is. And I think that's how we deal with it. So, so lovely to get to know you. So lovely to get to know you. You are one of those souls that makes my heart truly happy. And I'm honored to have worked on this project with you. Until next time.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. And yes, usually on my channel, there's a portion where I ask questions to the other person and then they ask questions to me, but not this time because we did a different kind of thing for her channel where she asked me questions about history and I told her what I knew about them. There was a lot of holes. So she asked me about history. I told her what I sort of kind of remembered from school, and then she's going to answer the question because she knows a lot about history. So I'm really excited to see that, and I will put the link down below. I hope you'll go check it out and show her channel some love. So, yes, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who watched. Please let me know your thoughts, your experiences, especially any experiences about racism, about injustice, because telling our stories is what can change the world. I truly believe that. So, hugs. See you next Thursday.